It was 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. An elderly woman sat on a single tattered suitcase. Her name was Rose. She was 68 years old. Her hands, gnarled by decades of scrubbing other people's floors, were trembling as she clutched a worn leather-bound Bible to her chest. Our channel tells the stories the world tries to forget. We tell the modernist Africa folktale of the streets and the boardrooms. We believe that your character is your true currency and that fate has a very long memory. You're ready for a story that will make your heart ache and then make you want to cheer. Do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on your notifications. And leave a comment below saying, I believe in justice. It helps the algorithm. Show these lessons to the people who need to hear them most. Behind the massive mahogany doors of that mansion stood her only daughter, Sarah. Sarah was wearing a silk robe that cost more than Rose had earned in an entire year of cleaning. I told you, Mom. Sarah's voice was cold, echoing through the grand foyer. Marcus's parents are coming to stay for a month. They're old money. They are refined. I can't have you here smelling like bleach and cheap cooking oil. Sitting in the corner like a servant. You're embarrassing me. You're useless to this life I've built. Rose looked up, her eyes milky with cataracts but filled with a devastating clarity. Sarah, I have nowhere to go. It's midnight. Sarah didn't even flinch. She reached into her Chanel purse, pulled out a $50 bill and tossed it onto the wet pavement. Take an Uber to a shelter. Don't call me. I need to live my life now. The door clicked shut. The heavy bolt slid into place. And just like that, the woman who had sacrificed her youth, her health, and her spine to put Sarah through Ivy League schools was a homeless statistic. Now, before I tell you the incredible heart-stopping thing that happened 5 years later, and what was actually hidden inside that old Bible, I want to welcome you to the channel. If you believe that a mother's love is a debt that can never truly be repaid, and if you love stories where the arrogant are brought to their knees while the humble finally find their crown, then you are in the right place. Go ahead, hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but for us it means the world. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Let's see how a useless mother became the key to a mystery that would change everything. To understand why Sarah could be so cruel, you have to understand the world she desperately wanted to belong to. Rose had come to America from a small village in Ghana when she was 24. She arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a dream for the child she was carrying. Sarah's father had passed away before they ever left, leaving Rose to face the land of opportunity, alone. For 30 years Rose worked 3 jobs. She was the woman you saw at 4 a.m. waiting for the bus in the freezing cold. She was the woman who cleaned the luxury office buildings in Midtown, scrubbing the toilets of CEOs who never looked her in the eye. She lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the sirens never stopped screaming. She slept on the couch so Sarah could have the bed. Ate bread and tea for dinner so Sarah could have organic fruit and new sneakers. Rose had one rule. My daughter will not be a cleaner. He will be the person who owns the building. And Sarah was brilliant. She was sharp, beautiful, and ambitious. But as Sarah climbed the social ladder, she began to view her mother not as a hero but as a stain. When Sarah got a scholarship to a prestigious university, she told her classmates her mother was a retired educator back in Africa. She was ashamed of the calluses on Rose's hands. She was ashamed of her mother's thick accent. By the time Sarah met Marcus, a wealthy real estate developer from a family that had owned half of Atlanta since the 1950s, the lie was complete. Sarah told Marcus that her mother was difficult and unsophisticated. When they got married, Rose wasn't invited to sit in the front row. She was told to stay in the kitchen and help the caterers so she wouldn't clash with the aesthetic of the wedding photos. Rose did it. She did it all with a smile because she loved her daughter more than she loved her own dignity. But Marcus was a man who smelled weakness. He saw how Sarah treated her mother, and he followed suit. He began to call Rose the help in front of guests. He would drop his shoes in front of her and wait for her to polish them. Then came that Tuesday night. The night Sarah decided that her mother was no longer a useful part of her brand. As Rose walked away from the mansion in the rain, she didn't head for a shelter. She walked until her legs gave out, ending up at a small 24-hour bus station. She opened her Bible, the one thing Sarah hadn't thrown in the trash because it looked antique and expensive. Inside the cover, Rose had written a proverb her own mother had taught her. A river that forgets its source will soon run dry. Rose looked at her $50. She looked at her Bible. And then she looked at the ring on her finger. A simple silver band she'd kept since her village days. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "God, watch over my child. He has forgotten who she is." 5 years passed. In the world of the wealthy, 5 years can be a lifetime. For Sarah, those years were a slow-motion car crash. At first, life was perfect. She was the queen of Buckhead. She hosted the best galas. She wore the latest couture. But Marcus wasn't the man she thought he was. He was a gambler, not with cards but with other people's money. He had leveraged their mansion, their cars, and Sarah's own trust fund to back a series of failed developments in North Georgia. Even worse, Marcus's refined parents weren't the source of his wealth. They were the source of his debt. The cracks started small. A credit card declined at a luncheon. A maintenance issue that meant the pool stayed empty for a year. Then the rumors started. Marcus was seen with younger women in Miami. He stayed away for weeks at a time. Whenever Sarah tried to confront him, he would laugh. "You're just like your mother, Sarah. You're becoming useless. Maybe I should throw you out in the rain too." The irony was a knife in Sarah's heart. She had traded the only person who truly loved her for a man who viewed her as a depreciating asset. By the 5th year, the bank moved in. The for sale sign went up. Marcus disappeared to the Cayman Islands with whatever cash was left, leaving Sarah to face the creditors alone. Sarah was left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a few boxes of personal items. She was forced to move into a studio apartment in the very neighborhood she had spent her life trying to escape. She spent her days working as a junior clerk at a law firm, earning a fraction of what she used to spend on a single pair of shoes. She was lonely. She was broken. And she was haunted. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face in the rain. One Sunday, desperate for some kind of peace, Sarah reached into a dusty box. She was looking for a book to distract her mind. Instead, her hand brushed against something cold and leather. It was her mother's Bible. Sarah hadn't opened it in 5 years. She had kept it only because it felt like a heavy, physical manifestation of her guilt. She sat on her small, stained mattress and opened the cover. She saw the proverb, "A river that forgets its source will soon run dry." Sarah broke down. The tears she'd been holding back for half a decade finally came. She flipped through the pages, seeing her mother's shaky handwriting in the margins of the Psalms. Praying for Sarah's test today. Praying for Sarah's new job. Praying that Sarah finds a good man. Rose had prayed for her every single day, even while Sarah was plotting to kick her out. As Sarah reached the book of Proverbs, she noticed that the spine of the Bible felt thick, unusually stiff. She ran her fingers along the inside of the leather. Finding there was a slit. She reached inside, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her fingers curled around something small, cold, and metallic. She pulled it out. It was a key. A heavy, old-fashioned brass key with a small plastic tag attached to it. On the tag, in her mother's unmistakable, elegant script, were 3 words and a number. For the source. Box 714. Below that was the name of a bank that hadn't existed in 15 years. The Old Southern Trust. Sarah stared at the key. Her mother was a cleaning lady. She had nothing. She died in a state-run nursing home 2 years prior. Sarah hadn't even gone to the funeral because she was too busy with a merger that never happened. Or so she thought. Sarah had assumed her mother died penniless. So what could possibly be in box 714? Was it just old photos? A few heirlooms from the village? Sarah didn't sleep that night. The next morning she took the bus to the main branch of the bank that had bought out Old Southern Trust. She walked up to the private vault teller, her hands shaking so hard she had to hide them in her pockets. "I'd like to access a safe deposit box," she whispered. Box 714. Was under the name Rose Mensah. The teller, an older woman with kind eyes, looked at the key and then at Sarah. "Wait here, dear. That's an old one. We had to move those to the high-security basement years ago. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, the teller returned, followed by a man in a very expensive suit. He wasn't a teller. He was the branch manager. "Are you Sarah Mensah?" the man asked. His voice was filled with a strange kind of reverence. "I am," Sarah said. "We've been waiting for you for a very long time, Ms. Mensah. Your mother was a very particular woman. She left very specific instructions about this box. She said it could only be opened when you knew the value of $1 and the weight of a tear." The manager led her down 2 flights of stairs, past 3 security checkpoints, into a room made of reinforced steel. He placed a long metal box on the table and handed Sarah a pair of white gloves. "I'll leave you alone," he said. "But I think you should sit down first." Sarah opened the lid. Inside the box there were no photos. There were no trinkets. At the very top was a legal document. It was a deed. A deed to the very land in Midtown Atlanta where the skyscraper Sarah used to clean now stood. And beneath the deed were rows and rows of something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Sarah is about to find out the truth about who her mother the cleaner really was, and the massive secret she kept to protect her daughter from the very world that destroyed her. Sarah's hands moved like they were made of glass. Beneath the deed to that Midtown land that now sat under a 50-story glass skyscraper, were stacks of stock certificates. Not for some fly-by-night tech company but for the very cleaning conglomerate Rose had worked for 30 years. But it wasn't the money that made Sarah stop breathing. It was a thick yellowed envelope at the bottom of the box. On it in fading ink was written, "The price of a dream." Sarah opened it. Inside were hundreds of tiny handwritten ledgers. October 12th, extra shift at the hospital, $42. Put into the trust. January 4th, found a discarded sofa. Fixed the fabric. Sold for $100. Put into the trust. August 19th, skipped lunch for 2 weeks. $30 saved. Put into the trust. Sarah realized with a sickening thud in her chest that for 30 years her mother hadn't just been working to survive. She had been a silent architect. Rose had been buying shares of the company she cleaned for bit by bit through an employee stock purchase program that most people ignored. She had been paying the back taxes on a small plot of worthless family land her father had bought in the 1970s, which had eventually become the most expensive real estate in Georgia. But the most devastating item was a letter, dated the very night Sarah had kicked her out. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began. "If you are reading this, the world has taught you the lesson I was too weak to teach you myself. I saw you changing, my child. I saw you looking at me and seeing only a servant. I saw you looking at Marcus and seeing only a king. I knew that if I gave you this wealth, then you would have used it to build a bigger wall between us. You would have used it to buy more masks." The letter continued, "I stayed in that kitchen at your wedding because I wanted to see if there was any of my daughter left under the silk. I sat on those steps in the rain because I wanted to give you one last chance to be a human being. When you tossed that $50 bill at me, I knew the river had run dry. I knew you had to lose everything to find yourself again." Sarah let out a choked sob that echoed in the high-security vault. Her mother hadn't been useless. She had been the most powerful person in Sarah's life, holding a fortune that could have ended her struggle at any moment but choosing to let Sarah face the fire so she wouldn't burn for eternity in her own arrogance. The reckoning didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in a glass boardroom on the 48th floor of the building Rose used to scrub. Marcus was there, flanked by his lawyers trying to finalize a deal to sell the development rights of the Midtown land to a foreign investment group. He needed this deal to pay off the men he owed in the Caymans. He looked tired, his expensive suit rumpled, his old money charm replaced by the desperate sweat of a cornered rat. "The title is clear," Marcus barked at the investors. "My wife's family owned. She signed everything over to me in the prenup." "Actually," a voice said from the doorway. The room went silent. Sarah walked in. She wasn't wearing couture. She was wearing a simple dark suit she'd bought at a thrift store, her hair pulled back, just like Rose used to wear it. The prenup covered assets Sarah Mensah owned at the time of marriage, Sarah said, placing the deed on the table. But this land never belonged to me. It belonged to the Rose Mensah Trust. And the trust has a clause: assets only transfer to the heir upon the proof of character and humility, as certified by the executor. Marcus laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Your mother? That woman didn't have a cent. She was a janitor, Sarah. Get out of here before I have security throw you out again. Sarah didn't flinch. She signaled to the man standing behind her, the branch manager from the bank who was also the executor of the trust. Mr. Marcus, the manager said, his voice cold. Ms. Rose Mensah was the largest individual shareholder in the company that provides the very maintenance for this building. More importantly, she held the ground lease. You've been building on land you don't own. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, the trust has terminated your lease for breach of contract and fraudulent representation. Marcus's face went from pale to gray. The investors stood up, closing their briefcases. They didn't deal with fraudsters. You're broke, Marcus, Sarah said quietly. And the best part? You're exactly what you accused my mother of being. You're useless. As Marcus was escorted out by the very security guards he used to command, he looked at Sarah, begging. Sarah, please. We can fix this. Think of our life. I am thinking of my life, Sarah said. And for the first time I can see it clearly. Sarah didn't take the millions and move back to Buckhead. He didn't buy a Rolls-Royce or a mansion. Instead, she went to the 24-hour bus station where her mother had spent her last night of freedom. She bought the empty lot across the street. Within a year, a building rose there. It wasn't a skyscraper. It was the Rose House, a state-of-the-art facility for elderly women who had spent their lives in service. It was a place where the help became the guests of honor. Sarah worked there every day. Not as the CEO in a corner office, but on the floor. She learned the names of every woman. She listened to their stories. And every morning at 5 a.m. she would pick up a mop. She did it not because she had to, but because every time she felt the wooden handle in her hand, she felt her mother's touch. She realized that the useless work of cleaning the world was the only thing that kept the world human. Sarah kept the Bible on her nightstand. Every night she would open it to the book of Proverbs and touch the place where the key had been hidden. She realized that the key wasn't to a box of money, it was a key to a door she had locked. Inside herself, the river that had run dry was flowing again. This brings us to the end of our tale, but the lesson remains for all of us. Your position in life is just a costume. The CEO and the janitor are made of the same red blood and the same quiet tears. Never look down on the hands that raised you, because those hands might be the only thing holding up the world you're standing on. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to call your mother or to treat the person cleaning your office with the respect they deserve, then please like this video. It tells the world that these values still matter. If you haven't yet, join our family by hitting that subscribe button. If you have so many more stories to tell, stories of justice, stories of heart, and stories of the legendary payback that only fate can deliver. Leave a comment below with the word source if you stayed until the very end. It lets me know who the true listeners are. Remember, your value doesn't decrease because someone fails to see it. Sometimes, the greatest treasures are hidden in the places we least expect, even in the pages of an old, worn Bible. Until next time, keep your heart humble and your spirit strong. This is Modernist Africa Folktale, and we'll see you in the next story.